Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Kardec Radio now offers more programs during the week and weekends. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can follow the beautiful program God at Home with Francisca Kranz and the British Spiritist community. They will brighten your days by doing a God at Home meeting wherever you are in the world, while teaching you how to do the same in your own home with your family and friends. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will hear incredibly inspirational Spiritist talks directly broadcasted by Spiritist Network. They will be true educational moments to carry out to immortality. Every Saturday, live interviews, Bridging Health and Spiritism with the host Dr. Vanessa Anceloni. You may ask questions to the interviewed guests by calling 858-769-4705. And every Sunday, tune in to Spiritist Awareness at Kardec Radio. You will hear a series of segments on a diversity of Spiritist topics. Kardec will broadcast the Spiritist Moment with Kirsten DeMello, the reading of the Spiritist book by John DeRosa and Steve Shepard, Spiritism in Your Life with Drs. Marco and Joyce Magalhães, Spiritism and the Gospel with Luis Sergio Marotta, Spiritist Education for Youth and Children with Bernadette Leal, Spiritist Music with James Marotta, Neuroscience and Spiritism with Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, and many more segments coming soon. Enjoy it all and nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Did you know you can help support Kardec Radio to enrich the lives of others? Make your love donation at www.kardecradio.com. Would you like to show support while spreading the word about Kardec Radio? Visit the Kardec Radio online store. Go to www.kardecradio.com and click on store.
Getting to the Light, Spiritist Therapy for Discarnate Spirits is a small book that offers guidance to Spiritist practitioners and Spiritist counselors. Purchase your copy at www.ssbaltimore.org.
If you missed out on previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand sections of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website, www.kardecradio.com.
Message from the book Happy Life by Joanna De Angelis, psychographed by Divaldo Franco. When you are at the point of quitting something worthwhile, pray and continue to the end. When you find yourself ready to make a mistake, pray and calmly avoid it. When you realize that you don't have the strength to do your good work, pray and get new energy and arrive at your planned destination. When tempted into a bothersome situation, pray and get your balance back. When you feel abandoned by the person you believe in or whom you love, pray and have patience remaining at your post. When you are discouraged and ready to fall down, without any more courage, pray and you'll be granted the stamina for victory. Never stop praying.
Traveling to another country? Immigrating elsewhere? Prepare yourself by reading the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, in which several loving and wise spirits wrote through the hands of Chico Xavier and Waldo Vieira, telling all of us the tips and hints of a successful transition to a new land. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Books of Andre Luis. Through the hands of the most prolific medium of all times, Chico Xavier, the spirit doctor Andre Luis wrote a series of books that unveil the mechanisms of life and life after life. From the best-selling novel No Solar, Our Home, to And Life Goes On, the reader will find illumination for a fulfilled life on Earth as well as immortal happiness. Check the many titles available at the international distributor, EDICEI of America. Their website is www.ediceiofamerica.com. Welcome to Spiritist Talks on Kardec Radio.
The topic of today on the therapeutics of mediumship invites us for a very personal meditation, reflection actually, of all times in which two different centuries we had two different leaders that were living crucial moments in their nations. One in the 19th century and another one in the 20th century. It was a time of pre-war in both cases. It was a time of great conflicts within and between nations. When the closest friends brought mediums in the presence of these leaders. Mrs. Maynard was young. She was young, she wasn't married, and she used to bring about the teachings of the beyond. When once the wife of the leader of this nation came about and asked her to bring advice to the President of the United States at that time. He was very conflicted, but as a good leader, he wouldn't share how conflicted he was. He wouldn't tell anyone, but the good spirits could tell. They could see all and everything, things that actually Mrs. Maynard captured through her mediumship. It was when she approached Abraham Lincoln, and in her own words she said, "For more than an hour I was made to talk to him, and learned from my friends afterwards that it was upon matters that he seemed fully to understand, while they comprehended very little until that portion was reached that related to the forthcoming Emancipation Proclamation. He was charged with the utmost solemnity and force of manner not to obey the terms of its issue, and not to delay its enforcement as a law beyond the opening of the year. And he was assured that it was to be the crowning event of his administration and his life. And that while he was being counseled by strong parties to defer the enforcement of it, hoping to supplant it by other measures and to delay action, he must in no wise heed such counsel, but stand firm to his convictions and fearlessly perform the work and fulfill the mission for which he had raised up by an overruling providence." Mrs. Maynard, the medium who brought an enlightenment to the lives of Americans, by counseling in a very wisely manner, Abraham Lincoln brought the steps of freedom that many were looking for, while the material interests of others were blocking the way. But on the other hand, in the 20th century, another leader who was very disturbed by the fact that he saw he couldn't win the election. He had a very close friend who was in touch with the spirit realm more often than not, and came about with the reading that he shouldn't be alarmed by any results of the polls, because he would be the leader of all leaders in Germany, the one that would historically change the history of Germany forever, that would bring the history of the German people to never foreseen altitudes. And the medium said, "You'll be the one that will bring the sovereignty of the people of Germany above all others. And most important, you'll be the one who will finally make justice." And he was the medium who counseled Adolf Hitler. And not only counseled, but had other people at his deathbed reminding Adolf Hitler that he was the one that opened Adolf Hitler's mind to his mission. And it was through his counseling that Adolf Hitler followed his advice and brought great harm and disgrace not only to the Germans, but to humanity. In one of the most barbaric wars that planet Earth has ever faced, two different mediums that influenced in great manner the lives of thousands and millions of people in our planet. And we ask, what is the role of mediumship? Is it only in reading? Are we supposed to charge? If not, why? What is the true purpose of mediumship, and how does it happen? Is it an art? Is it a profession? Is it a skill? And these are some of the questions that we are to raise in this workshop. Questions that begin to be answered by when we get to know that mediumship has always existed. It doesn't pertain to modern times. It has always existed since ancient civilizations, from the ancient Egyptians, when the oracles, not only in Egypt, but also in Greece and even in the Roman Empire, we have the accounts of the virgin mediums who were in these temples, and through the oracles they would bring the readings to define the steps of not only the individuals per se, but the whole civilization in itself. And later on, we see it with Joan of Arc, the young French lady who heard the voices when she was a teenager and got to know of the steps in which she would make France free from subjugation of England. And it was back then that we recall the many instances in which one day in the 19th century, March 31st, 1848, the Fox sisters in Hydesville, upstate New York, they brought about the history, the new history of modern spiritualism. The raps, the noises, and later on the communications of Charles Rosna, a spirit that was murdered by the previous owner of that home, was about to reveal that spirits exist because they are simply human beings who lost their physical body in physical death. But as much as any one of us, the Fox sisters got to know that we survive physical death, and that some of us can be the instruments of this communication, if not to say all, between the physical plane and the spiritual plane. Allan Kardec, in the Medium's book, shared with us that mediumship is actually a phenomenon that is processed by the brain of the medium. It's not created in the brain, although recent research has shown to us, like in this study by Dr. Andrew Newberg from Penn State University, by studying people, Pentecostals who speak in tongues, in Spiritism we would say, they're likely to be speaking mediums that exercise the mediumship of Shana Glossi, speaking foreign languages. They actually have, as you can see here on the right, the scanning of the brains of mediums who were speaking in tongues, comparing to the left one. The left side is the people who were simply singing gospel songs, not necessarily they were in trance, and they observed very, very clearly that two main areas of the brain is differently activated during those actions. So we can see here that the frontal lobes that are usually involved in willful control of behaviors, they are more active when these people were singing the gospel songs than when they were in the trance of mediumship, speaking in tongues. Telling us simply, from our spiritist perspective, that when the spirit is under that type of trance, the prefrontal cortex area is less activated, because that's the area of the brain that is supposedly to work our reasoning, and that's blunted in so many ways. Probably one of the reasons why many mediums don't recall what they are doing, or say they are less in control of their physical bodies. And on the other hand, as you can see in the circling, the small circle, the left caudate area, which is mostly involved in motor and emotional control, is less active in those who are speaking tongues as well. Another area of the brain that is again confirming to us which areas of the brain are being processed to explain why mediums, once again during trance, feel that they are less in control of their emotional and motor movements as well. Besides that, there is a recent paper that was published in the journal Epilepsy Behavior. It was just published this past May, showing that patients who had epileptic seizures may actually increase or decrease or have altered religious experience, and most of them had these epileptic crises involving nuclei of the temporal lobe, showing to us, as these scientists explain, Devinsky and Lay, that the two main forms of religious experience and the ongoing belief pattern and set of conditions versus the ecstatic religious experience may predominantly be localized in the frontal and temporal lobes of the high hemisphere. These are findings of science telling us that possibly the brain has specific pathways and involvements in regard to how we process trance mediumship and these religious experiences. In the latest edition of the Spiritist magazine, as you read, Dr. Melvin Morse brings us the account that mostly throughout the findings of science, we can tell that somewhat the right temporal lobe is highly involved in trance mediumship. And these states of spirituality, religiosity. So the question is it possible that while doctors are performing surgery, they may serve as instruments of good enlightened spirits who would like to intervene and bring a new health to this patient, like you can see in this drawing? And it's actually possible that spirits are working through specific chakras in our energetic body, in the perispiritual layers that are closest to the physical body, to produce trans-channeling. Is it possible that during automatic writing, we have specific areas of the brain actually being activated to produce such event? Any case such as psychometry. Chico Xavier, for example, would take a book he had never read before. He would hold it for a few seconds, and he could tell you the whole story inside the book. How can that possibly happen? As an example of psychometry. And he could simply get into a room and tell the whole story of the owners of that place. Where does that extrasensory information get into the physical brain is processed in such a way that sometimes even the medium cannot explain him or herself. So we're talking about the mechanisms of mediumship. As much as the physical body has the eyes to see, the skin to process the perception of touch, the ears to process the sound that travels within the air, and the smell that comes into the nose and is processed through the sensory organs, and as much as any other taste in our mouth and any other senses. Even pain is now considered one of the senses in human beings, where possibly the extrasensory information is processed through the physical body. If Kardec said that mediumship in many ways needs the physical body to be processed, where in the physical body we find the possible organ to process it? It's when André Luiz, through the mediumship of Chico Xavier, he unveiled to us the finding that in our brain we have that third eye, the pineal gland. The pineal gland, as the eyes of the soul in the physical body, that would capture very sensitive extrasensory information and somewhat be bridged up into the physical body. The pineal gland that could be called our sensory organ for mediumship. And people, as Dr. Sérgio Felipe de Oliveira has already studied in Brazil, when he was studying at the University of São Paulo, he got to know that actually we have special crystals in the pineal gland, crystals that would somewhat, physically speaking, open up the doorways for being the prism of this extrasensory information. Although we don't know yet the pathways in the brain through which the pineal gland sends this extrasensory information and is interpreted in many different ways, we have spirit accounts telling us that actually it is in that area of the brain that we find the eyes of the soul. Or as Descartes said once, the pineal gland as the seat of the soul. The seat of the soul, then now we ask, is it possible that when we come to such meetings or to mediumistic educational meetings, we may develop the way in which these layers of crystals in the pineal gland, they're being developed differently? Very likely. This is one of the hypotheses by the Medical Spiritist Association. Not only that, but the fact that every thought in our minds is a mental electromagnetic force. And we have the processing of that electromagnetic force forming living currents inside of us. And every thought that we have, as well explains Andrea Lewis in the book Mechanisms of Mediumship, every thought before it's externalized to the world, it's sent to our energetic body. It's processed within our minds and interconnects with the perispirit. And like a shower of mental electromagnetic current, we bathe our spiritual bodies. Consequently, we bathe our physical bodies into that mental electromagnetic force, defining us into the state of health or disease we may find ourselves. So before we even send out and project thoughts to the world, to other people, we actually bathe ourselves into those rays of mental electromagnetic forces. So before we communicate with one another, we actually have this living current that has very well-defined properties of self-excitation, because I can change the thoughts inside of my mind, and I can build them up according to my will. As Leon Denis said in the book, Here and Hereafter, we find in the will the driving force of human beings, of spirits. And through that will, we can actually bring about thoughts that we excite inside of our minds on our own, and we can change it whenever we want. It's what we call self-plasticity, as written in the book Mechanisms of Mediumship by Andrea Lewis. And Andrea Lewis concludes this chapter by saying that through these properties of our thoughts, forming living currents as we are here and now, we have an unimaginable co-creative power. So we are co-creators. Co-creators in the greatest sense, that we have our hands, and very likely, as Martins Peralva says, a Brazilian spiritist scholar, he clearly says, for the time being, we're mediums of the inferior spirits. More often than not, we speak words that we shouldn't. We write messages, especially nowadays in the world of internet. We more often than not spread news that weren't supposed to be spread. Jokes about sexist points of view, which are no actual jokes, because the human mind learns by repetition. And there are studies showing that just by seeing an information over and over again, we tend to believe it more and more, unconsciously speaking. So the more we spread out these messages that only bring disharmony or disbelief, we are actually being instruments of inferior minds. We are attuned with them. But there will be a day, he says, Mr. Peralva says, there will be a day in which we'll be instruments of the enlightened spirits, when we'll use our unimaginable power to co-create with God harmony, peace, and love. It's when we're going to demand less on one another and actually are going to serve more than actually we expected. It's when we're going to come to such organizations, and instead of demanding on how it should proceed to accommodate my needs, I will actually find a way to help in how other people's needs will be fulfilled. One day, we'll be like St. Paul in a very humble way, as in this book that was just launched. Believe it or not, they made it to translate 600 and plus pages. And the International Spiritist Council shows to us in this phenomenal book, through the mediumship of Francisco Xavier, the accounts of a true story of Paul of Tarsus when he was Saul and when he got to know more about the Christ consciousness thought. And through here, we learn about the humble mediumship, the true therapeutics of mediumship. When Saul was being the mediums of inferior minds, persecuting the harmonious proposal of Christ through his followers, until the day he was so conflicted about everything that was happening by persecuting one of the men who were following Christ's teachings, Ananias, and by following the path to Damascus, the city where Ananias was at the time. Conflicted in his mind, in this inner dialogue, unconscious inner dialogue with Christ, when he couldn't understand why his former future wife, Abigail, she converted herself to those teachings, and she died very peacefully because she got to know from Ananias that the Messiah had already come. And he didn't come to destroy to any kingdom, but instead to bring harmony and peace. He was conflicted by her death, by the fact that he involuntarily murdered his wife-to-be's brother, Stephen. In a very dramatic way, we would say tragic way. He was so conflicted that in that inner dialogue, Christ found an open door to come and talk to him in a more sensible way. It's when Christ, without invading the inner dialogue within Paul, he came about and shared new ideas by asking, why are you persecuting me? Why so? Why? How many of us like so? In our uncontrolled mediumship, do things, persecute people in our own family, and we don't even know why. Sometimes we see this conflict inside of us. I don't know, I like that person, but something inside of me makes me feel this anguish or anger or resentment. I know it's not mine, but we don't recognize it's coming from the minds of the beyond that actually sometimes don't like our loved ones. How many parents, often in their unknown mediumship, beat their children? Chico Xavier often says, he used to say, many parents, without noticing, are the instruments of the obsessing entities of their very children. When they tell their children, you serve to nothing, you'll be nobody. Not only they say it, verbally abusing them, but they spank them, they physically abuse them in such a way that can actually impair them to success later in life. And like Saul, he wasn't aware, as many of us are not aware of our own mediumship, of the fact that it happens 24/7, open doors. When he finally tired of those conflicts, he allowed Christ to come and present himself and say, come, let's work together. But before he made that shift, his physical eyes had to be blinded. He had to do this journey within and to find the new soul, who was actually turned into Paul, to find into this deep humbleness that he, to be an instrument as faithful as he was, as loyal he was trying to be to God's laws through Moses' teachings, he got to know that the best way to serve is to serve in humbleness. But one day, Silas and Paul, years after his conversion, he was already aware of his task. He was preaching in a city where there was a famous temple and the virgin mediums as the mediums of that temple, being the instruments of the oracle. When Silas and Paul got to that city and were invited to preach about the new teachings of Christ, and there they were, when one of these virgin mediums came about, and she was in trance, and she was saying, here are the prophets of the new time. And they were praising Paul and Silas. For Silas, who was an apprentice of Paul, he thought, wow, that's great. That people recognize in us the new prophets of the new world. Well, the second day came about, and again, there she was. While they were preaching, she was praising them again and again. And how many mediums nowadays, when they receive those praises and the gifts and the money, they say, oh, well, I well deserve it because it's my time. And I'm a missionary, so, that's the least that I need and I deserve from the people. It was when Paul, learning that the number one rule for a good mediumship is humbleness. In his mediumship, he could see the disturbed spirits that were influencing that virgin medium, and came about and said, leave this body. And they left. But Silas was astonished. He said, come on, Paul, she's just praising us. Oh, yeah. But the voices that speak through her are not the voices of goodness. They are the voices of evil. Because we are nobody. We are just instruments. And we need to praise the Lord for all this, but not ourselves. We have just started this pathway. And we shouldn't allow any of this to happen to us. There, he shared with us in these words that are written in the New Testament, that the good missionaries of God, they use their co-creative power, but in a humble way. The true mediums, like Chico Xavier and Divaldo Franco. Divaldo Franco, who just came about, and many people asked us, how come we don't know of Divaldo Franco in the U.S. as much as other mediums? For one reason. The good mediums, they don't allow marketing to happen. They don't allow people to come and sell their image. And I personally know many people who come and say, how about if we bring people to Divaldo Franco's Mission of the Way to teach them how to do it? That's not how you're going to do it. And Divaldo Franco doesn't allow that to happen. If you want to visit, well, but that's not the next John of God place for you to visit. Because the good medium doesn't allow the selling of sacred mediumship. And because we are in our headquarters, we're supposed to share it. We respect the ones who sell their mediumship, but that's a big mistake. A mistake that we'll see in the limitations of the product of that mediumship. A mediumship that unparalleled, like Divaldo Franco and Chico Xavier, as Divaldo Franco explained very clearly in this DVD. This is about his life, and this is about mediumship phenomena, workshop, a 4-hour workshop that he gave in Lilydale, upstate New York, which explains, either in this DVD or in the book, The Dynamics of Our Sixth Sense, the whole 9 yards about a fruitful, productive, harmonious, peaceful mediumship that brings to us the understanding that our lives are ruled by the fact that we naturally, through exchange of thoughts and the living currents that we form, we have a spiritual network. A spiritual network that is always with us. Spirits who like us, spirits who not necessarily have the best feelings about us, fair, because we're not perfect. And sometimes unconsciously we really mess up other people's lives, unfortunately. And if we don't do in this life, we have done in the past. So it takes time for us really to make this spiritual network harmonious. But the fact is that we influence one another. As much as they influence us, our good actions may influence them. How? It's the therapeutics again of our own mediumship. As Kardec said, we're all mediums. For one reason. Because we are all, in any degree, minor or major, influenced by other minds. Maybe it's not very ostensible, but we do. And Divaldo Franco once, because we all reincarnate in this life, he got in the network, in his spiritual network, one entity that actually didn't like him. And for 30 years, tried to bring about conflicts, problems, and confusion. By making people next to him not accept Divaldo Franco as he was, an enemy from a previous life, who little by little tried to bring embarrassment in Divaldo Franco's life. But he instead didn't allow himself to be obsessed, because one thing is to be influenced, another thing is to allow the influence to stay inside of us. So the Spirit actually did not obsess Divaldo, because he didn't allow the suggestions of that mind to sink in his. Until one day, Divaldo, well aware, after 30 years, continuing his work that at the very beginning people were like, why you're so young, caring for children who are abandoned? Why? And he was a very handsome man who could have his own family. But he discarded the comfort of a personal life, aware of his task in this life, in our eyes, a mission, to bring the comfort that he could serve to himself, give it to other people, to our families, to other families, that apparently were not his. But he knew as a spiritual person that everyone is our family. And in that regard, one day, at the door of the Mansion of the Way, a woman who was very poor, she just had a baby. She couldn't take care of the baby. And the baby was somewhat not very beautiful. The baby had the cleft lip, right? The cleft lip. And was very skinny, was truly coming from an underprivileged family. The woman knocked on the door, and Divaldo Franco, the day before, had said to the whole team, we have no place to accommodate any new child. Well, that obsessing spirit heard the saying and wanted to see how far Divaldo Franco would go to really show that he was a renewed person. So it was when the mother came along and said, Mr. Franco, I can't take care of this child. They said, we don't have place anymore. But Mr. Franco, I'm sorry. I'll trash this child out if you don't take it. That's as dramatic as it was. Well, he said, okay, we'll take care of the child then. So he took the child in the arms, looked at the child, and he said, it was really hard just to look at the child to see how in difficult conditions the child was. But he said, we have to do our part. They didn't have the resources at the time, not at all. They were full in their capacity at the mention of the way. But according to the principles he decided to follow in his path, he said, oh well, that's what we have to do. God's going to find a way. And how many of us in our daily lives, we're like, I don't have the money, I don't have time, and people call, they want us to visit them, and we're not even talking about strangers. We're talking about people that are very close to us, friends, family, colleagues at work, and we don't go walk the extra mile. Well, Divaldo decided to do. Good for him, because at that very moment, as he said a prayer, enveloping that child in certainty that he would give the best that they could, the obsessing spirit appears right next to him and says, Divaldo, so you're going to take care of that child? And he said, yes, I will. How? Didn't you say you didn't have the resources? Are you going to allow this child to starve to death? And he said, no, I won't. We will find a way. Oh, really? But are you going to love this child? As ugly as she is. It was a baby girl. And he said, well, I will. I don't love her yet, but I will. That's one of our missions. And Divaldo said it with such love that the spirit was truly moved. Why? Because he said, Divaldo, this is my mother reincarnated. Are you going to take care of her? And he said, yes, I will. From that moment on, the obsessing spirit decided to give Divaldo a break. It is in this therapeutic of mediumship that we find also a way to repair the wrongdoings of our past. When we, in this two-way exchange of thoughts and feelings and emotions with our spiritual network, we may educate the ones who once were partners in wrongdoings and now demand that we keep our addictions, that we reinforce our pride, that we reinforce our selfishness. But if we do otherwise, they will also be influenced by us. And it was from that day on that the obsessing spirit, he tried to be an obsessor, but he couldn't, because Divaldo didn't give in to that negative, persistent influence in his life. He didn't give in. And not only he helped a member, a loved one of the obsessing spirit, but took him also to a new opportunity to see life in a very different way. It's the therapeutics of mediumship in our lives. Many people say, or they come to the spiritist centers, say, I want to be a medium. I want to be a writing medium. I want to be a speaking medium. I want to be a healing medium. Oh, well. So let's meditate on this. There is a scholar named Amilcar Filho who wrote this beautiful text that now we may read together, and you may define how you, if in any way you'd like to take, can you take one pass around, please? Thank you. Amilcar de Filho brings to us the insights how we can make mediumship truly therapeutic in our lives and in the lives of everyone inside, within our circle of relationship. And he says, and you can think about it in your own personal magnitude, because we are all mediums. If you want to develop automatic writing or psychography, begin by writing small notes of encouragement to family members, friends, colleagues at work, birthday cards, wish well cards, etc. Then start writing longer letters for chronically ill patients, people who live alone, prisoners, and others. Little by little, the good spirits will inspire you whenever you write. Maybe you will not publish bestsellers, but your writings will certainly be useful. If you'd like to develop your speaking mediumship, begin talking about beautiful things. Do not either curse or be ironic. May you always have words of harmony, peace, and understanding. Comfort those who are suffering, guide the ones who are lost, and soon the good spirits will be by your side when you need to speak. Maybe you will not be a great speaker, but you'll be blessed by everyone. If you aspire to be a seeing medium, then observe the landscapes of nature. Value the smile of a child, the trembled steps of an aging woman. See the beauty of life and treasure it. Appreciate the natural beauty of the sky, the stars, the silver light of the moon, and the golden light of the sun. If you'd like to become a prescribing medium, begin by taking a needy person to the doctor. Take his or her prescription and buy their medication. This is a good beginning. Other ways will appear sooner or later. If instead you would like to heal people through the laying on of hands, start by helping someone. Take care of an ill person. Talk to him or her. Make him or her company. Read for the ill person. Sing a song, play an instrument, say a prayer. And by the way, you don't need a spiritist center to do that. Because many people come to us and say, can we do this program? Yes, you can. But you don't need the spiritist center to do it, so you join, especially in the United States. There are so many volunteer programs. Some of the most beautiful ones. We don't need the people in the center to go there and start a volunteer work. We can just do it ourselves. And you can call your closest friends to do it. We don't need to wait on any organization to do it. All we need to do is to start it ourselves. And if you'd like to develop your physical mediumship by materializing spirits, remember that reincarnation on earth is the most beautiful and useful materialization of a spirit. Be a responsible, kind father or mother. Love your children and the children of others, especially the ones who suffer. Educate them and illuminate their lives with your love. And by the way, we see many parents who are wonderful. Some of them are here. They teach their children at home. They don't wait on spiritist centers to teach them about a good prayer, about the teachings of spirituality. But sad to say that some parents don't even teach their children how to pray. They don't. Because they think their children will learn when they get older. Well, how about using the fact that we have good friends of the beyond always with us, the guardian angels of all of us, the guardian angels of our children, and teach them how to engage into these other realms in true wisdom. And finally, if you'd like to be a good spirit counselor or coordinator of spiritist meeting, learn to speak about the love of God, of goodness. Be optimistic and talk about optimism. Do not demand moral changes in others. Do not let yourself be enveloped in discouragement. Intensify your faith. Appreciate life. Love it. Try it. Maybe you'll never become famous or have your name written in the newspapers, but you will find inner, irreplaceable satisfaction. For everyone who wants to be a medium in a more ostensible way, this is the way to begin. And take this with you. Find, if each week we have 6 days and on the 7th you rest, okay? As God did God rest? I'm not sure about it. But, of course, God didn't rest. But in a figurative way, you take Sunday too, or any day of the week. Maybe Monday, because Monday is more intense. But if at each day we revisit these paragraphs and say, you know what, today I'll send an email. There's no like going to the post office. There's no need to buy anything. Just click. There you go. Mouse click. Send a message to someone saying, you know, I was thinking about you. I miss you. You know, I was recalling that day we did XYZ things. You know, it's so much fun when it was so much fun. A small thing can bring new light to that person's life. Wouldn't it bring it into our lives? When someone sends us a message saying, you know what, I really appreciate your company. And that day was the day that your boss was being a little more intense with you, and then you get that message, well, it counterbalances, and you feel relieved. And then the next day, someone you've got to know who is ill, you bring them a cake. People don't know how to cook anymore. In this crisis time, we better learn it, because we need to save money. And it's good to go back home and cherish these moments together, learning the wisdom of cooking with love. Often my husband says, I don't know, but this is different, Vanessa. What did you do? I say, you know, a new seasoning there. Truly. Remember, thought is an electromagnetic force. If these living currents, which is actually energy, we place into the water that we drink. You can do this practice at home. Sometimes we are upset, and there we go. We are eating. I'm shocked when I see people having business meetings at lunchtime, because we're discussing problems, not solutions. More often we're talking about problems, and there we are eating. At work, I'm talking about. Having breakfast early in the morning, at work, discussing problems while we eat. No wonder people are getting sick, because we are eating the problems, because that energy stays in there. So what kind of mediums are we being? Instruments of wisdom, instruments of harmony. We need to change it. Sometimes a small word at work. I'll never forget one day I was at work, and I'm learning this too. That's why I'm sharing. I have not mastered, but at work one day I was asking my boss a favor, and he said, do you think I'm a charitable person? Because for him, charitable person was not good. And he said, do you think I'm a benefactor? And I said, yes, I think so. I think you are. I think you have a good heart. And he was shocked, because he never considered the fact that he could be a benefactor. Why not? It's a good thing to do. And I said, why not? Let's give me that time, and in turn, you see how much better you're going to feel. And he was like, it never crossed his mind. Never. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen with that information, but that was my part. And I said, I don't regret a minute. If ever I got fired by that, I would be happily fired. Because I said, there is a seed. As much as I like when people come to me and say, Vanessa, how about if you're kinder? And I said, you know what? You're right. I could. Never thought about it, because we're not coached in our everyday life. But people can be instruments of wisdom in their lives. And that's the true therapeutics of mediumship. The mediumship in which we serve. The true concept, the definition of therapeutics, if we go to the dictionary, is service. To be inclined to serve. In the Dictionary Britannica online, we get to know that the definition of therapeutics is to be inclined to serve, to prevent and to cure. Coaching ourselves like this, put it on the refrigerator or put it on your bedroom or your desk at work and go through it. You know, Benjamin Franklin, he needed a list. If the genius needed a list, why wouldn't we need a list too? And a visible one, not only a list in the mind because we keep forgetting it, but one that we make it visible and say, you know what? Okay. Birthday card. Whose birthday is it today? I don't know, so I better get to know. Oh, Liz's birthday. So happy birthday to Liz today. We'll sing it for you at the end. Colleagues at work, an encouragement to them. And then the next one, do not curse. Nowadays, it's becoming so more common that people, they think it's beautiful. They think it's charming sometimes. And I see this even in science. They're trying to break the protocol and think they're revolutionary to say a couple F words here and there. Yeah? And I'm like, you know, let's go back to Einstein's time, please, when we didn't need to bring that kind of energy into our environment. So we drop at least one of those words every day from our list. And as Joana de Angelis wisely said, substitute by beautiful words. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. And in that regard, in that regard, we would have a more beautiful spiritual body. Because whenever we are in conjunction with other entities being their instruments, our spiritual body is the first one that is going to feel this exchange. It is through the perispirit that we exchange information. So now imagine how many people get sick because they have unbalanced company from the spiritual body, the spiritual realm. They are not aware, but we should be aware. As you can see, in different types of mediumship, no matter what they are, from the conscious to the semi-conscious, to the unconscious, when our spiritual body is not very much emancipated to more extended and emancipated to when it's more fully separated from the physical body, no matter how conscious we are of this exchange with the other minds, we may always realize that it's happening through the sensorial organs of the spiritual body. As Allan Kardec clearly states in the Spirit's book, the sensations and perceptions of all of us happen not only here, but they happen mostly, the interpretation of all it, in the perispirit. And as we said, the pineal gland is the interface, and the master and commander of this mediumship is the perispirit. The perispirit that actually has this electromagnetic structure and is composed of billions of cells that are constantly active. Now, if we in the physical body are nourishing our physical body, are washing it, doing the proper hygiene habits, the question is, what is the food for the soul? What is the food for the spiritual body? What kind? The good food, what is it? What kind? Celestial types of fluids. This is the true food for the soul. If we don't pray, if we don't meditate, if we don't read good books, if we don't speak good things, if we don't, then we're starving to death, spiritually speaking. No wonder people are disturbed nowadays, because they don't know of this reality. And in that regard, as much as oxygen is the food for the body, the food for the soul, the one that allows these billions of cells in our spiritual body as well to be healthily active, they need this optimistic attitude. And in that regard, if we do so, the best mediumship is the one that therapeutically builds these constructive mental currents, the ones that will benefit all when we allow the natural flow of our mental energies to happen. And by doing so, as we are inclined to serve, we will attract good spirits naturally. Chico Xavier, he was not even a spiritist when he got to know of the teachings. And he got connected with good spirits. Why? Because of his good nature. We all have it because we're all children of God. We all have the potential. Like the prophet, the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce, he was not a spiritist. He didn't need to be a spiritist. He was the medium. One that once he got to know that under deep state of trance, he brought readings and readings and readings that helped the lives of many, many people. Readings in our day count for 30,000 and are at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. His readings brought a new life to many people, and many doctors still nowadays research on the readings that he brought regarding the cure of cancer, the cure of many different diseases, diabetes, etc., etc. Through his mediumship, he served. He didn't accept money for this. And anything people want to give, he went to the Future Association that started in the 30s, in the 20s, and then after the Great Depression, they had a slowdown of the construction, and later in the 50s, they got it back on track, and it's still there, serving to help enlightenment to many lives. But we would say one of the therapeutics of mediumship come when we do group mediumship. Group mediumship is something that is some of the most productive ways of working on mediumship. Many people ask nowadays, can I practice mediumship at home? Can you assure that your home is well sterilized to make sure that your spiritual network is up and running there? In organizations such as ours, for example, okay, it's safer. Why? Because here we don't allow of this space to be used for any bad use. It's only for good use. There's no TV here with violent programs. There's no way to gossip here. There's no bad actions happening here. So the energy fields are very protective. And when they are, if we do a meeting here and as a group, it's safer because we can help one another make sure that we are on the same page. And if by any chance we are tested in the presence of a spirit that wants to trick us, the rest of the group will say, be careful. This message is not a good message. So let's move forward. So group mediumship is probably the best way to go nowadays if we want to educate our mediumship, if we want to be productive. I have not met or known of any medium as productive as the Spiritist mediums. With all the respect to any medium who is not a Spiritist, the most prolific Spiritist mediums I've met and I've got to know are Spiritists. Why? Because as Emmanuel said, mediumship in itself is not nor good, neither bad. It's just an ability in itself. Just like the waterfalls. It has power in itself. But if we don't channel that power through the power plant, we're not going to have electricity. So Spiritism, as Emmanuel explains to us through Chico Xavier, it's like the power plant that takes the beauty and the force and the strength of mediumship channels it, disciplines, conducts it in such a way that brings light to the lives of many people. And in that regard, just so people can understand more what we do on Monday evenings, basically we have the communication of spirits. When spirit and medium are interconnected through their perispirits, we have the spirit director, the invisible entities, coordinating and planning this spirit surgery that is going to counsel through the counseling medium, the coordinators and other members of the meeting. They're going to guide the counseling and the spiritual surgery that happens in the perispiritual level of suffering spirits. And many people ask whether or not we are supposed to help suffering spirits. And we would say, well, if they are closer to us than the good spirits, they have denser body, we could give a hand and help the enlightened spirits rescue these earthbound spirits. Just like Chico Xavier did. When he wrote mediumistically this book, Paul and Stephen, he actually was in deep trance and brought to us the accounts that we know with information on the behind the scenes that we don't know. As much as André Luiz, this is Chico Xavier, you see, he always wrote mediumistically in the presence of a mediumistic group to make it safer, more protected, and to make sure everybody was also confirming the message, the goodness of the message. Emmanuel, as his mentor, was always there, and it was when the spirit André Luiz, as you can see here, sometimes the connection doesn't happen automatically, and it took 2 years for André Luiz to be in close connection with Chico Xavier for them to write the many books that we get to know, and now we have a new book in our bookstore, Workers of Life Eternal. It took André Luiz 2 years to be fully in sync with Chico Xavier and vice versa, so they could together at 4 hands write the accounts that now bring enlightenment about ourselves, the meaning of life, and about the true life, the spirit life. All these messages, if we can say, of all the therapeutic purposes of mediumship, the highlight is to serve with understanding and compassion. A compassion that only the Christ teachings could stimulate inside of us. One that allows us to renounce personal gains and allow other people also to connect with us. Sometimes the filtering of the message will be off, but time after time, as we exercise mediumship, we have the filtering of our minds cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And one day, just like it happened for St. Paul, little by little, he became the best medium of Christ on earth. And this is how I would like to wrap up. I know you have many questions, I can tell. And we have a couple minutes. We have 5 to 10 minutes actually for questions that you may have regarding the therapeutics of mediumship.
I know we have been talking about this question several times, but I will have more clarification about it, and it is, in our daily life, how can we distinguish between our own thoughts and the thoughts of the spirits of our companions?
Very good question in regard to very useful nowadays. How can we get to know of our thoughts and the thoughts of other spirits? When we quiet down the noise, we will distinguish. Some people, they're so electrified in their lives. They're like doing this, doing that. They never stop. They never quiet them down. For those people, they will never know. because they don't even know about themselves. So it's only when we practice meditation, visualization, meditation especially, it's when we regain control of ourselves. If we don't practice it, we'll never get to know which thoughts are ours and which thoughts are someone else's. It's when we quiet down, silence, breathe in and out, and allow the trains of thought to go through our minds as if they were a movie. And when we train to separate ourselves from that we'll get to know more about ourselves and later in time, the influences. Nowadays, with this fast-paced society, it becomes harder and harder because usually we just go with the flow of people's life space. But our task, if we want to get to know of what Alba mentioned to us, we need to regain control of ourselves. And as Divaldo Franco said very wisely a week ago, learn to act and not react. Take action. Someone says something to you, we process, and then instead of just responding, we elaborate it. And in that regard, we'll get to know more in self-control what is ours and what is someone else's. Okay? Meditation.
I also want to say, I read that, higher spirits, they talk a very elevated and very free words. So if you see something say hi, something negative for person, usually high spirits don't talk that way. That's what something like that.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I mean,
if it's something that saying, oh, look at her, ugly shoes, example. That's higher spirits don't talk that way.
Let's remind one thing. In the book, in the Domains of Mediumship, there was André Luiz with the Good Spirits, and they are following a journalist. He gets into a bar. The journalist is not a spiritist. He doesn't even know he's a medium. And there he is. He gets into a bar to write an article that will soon be published in a newspaper. And he is writing this article about a tragedy, about a murder that happened, and somewhat is related to a family, and specifically to one girl in the family. What he doesn't know as a journalist, and André Luiz and the spirits are seeing and observing, is that the journalist is connected to a very low frequency entity. He doesn't know that actually that entity is a common company of his. In his case, as André Luiz states, he cannot distinguish what is his and what is his entity. Why? Because they are in the same frequency. They are feeding each other. They're feeding each other. So they cannot distinguish. And when he is there, this entity has somewhat the mission to disturb the life of that girl in that family by creating a drama that will soon be published in the newspaper and will cause great turmoil in the family. In that case, the journalist and the low-frequency spirit are so much in sync that rarely, André Luiz says, and he got to know from the mentors, he would find out that the thoughts are not his. How many of us, we cannot tell what's ours and what's other familiar spirits just because we're in the same frequency. So sometimes, as Isabel said, we will distinguish because it's very different in nature of our common thoughts, but that's an exception. More common is that we are in the same frequency of people, spirits that are very much like us, and we cannot distinguish. That's why it doesn't matter, as the spirits say in the Spirit's book. It's not important to know whether or not the thoughts are ours, but to distinguish the quality of our thoughts, whether or not they are good or bad. Because once they are good, they are not going to incite any harm, provoke any damage into anybody's lives. That's the most important part. A good spirit, as Liz reminded us, will never say, yeah, don't talk to that person because that person doesn't deserve. The good spirit will never do. Not even if the person incited harm or created problems in our lives. Like the Pope John Paul II. The man who shot him, later he was in jail. Paul II, he came to the prison to forgive the man who tried to murder him. In the eyes of many people, that was outrageous. But in the eyes of people who are in tune with the higher spirits, that's the way to go. Which kind of spirits would tell him, yes, go for it, forgive that man? He doesn't know he was a sick person. He was a sick mind. Good spirits. The inferior ones would say, that person doesn't deserve even your company. You shouldn't even mention his name. Those kind of entities, if those thoughts cross our minds, they are in tune of low frequency. But remember, we're not victims. As the journalist, it was in the same frequency of that low spirit. And sometimes, more often than not, that happens to us too.
I think if we have some doubts, if we were influenced by lower frequency spirits or companion or whatever, how about if this journalist would, instead writing his article in a bar, smoking or drinking at the same time, he would write the same article, the same material in a peaceful place, for instance, or after a peaceful conversation with someone. Did he would write in the same way? No. Because that he would be not anymore in the low frequency, and also because he is in a higher frequency, he won't attract anymore the low frequency spirit. So it's a test. If we would be a different person, our product will be different. If we were in one place, in some company, and in another place, in a different company, in a different environment, a different spiritual thought or something. I think would be a test.
Very good. Very, very interesting comment too, because it brings the notion that, many spirits who are usually around us in that zone of the spiritual network, they don't want us to get out of their hands. So what do? And this is the case of when we don't educate our mediumship to the best of our abilities, is when they whisper. For example, I'll give a true example. Last weekend we had a magical day. That's the least I can say about that day. We put together a lot of efforts, not only for us, but for everyone who wanted this banquet of light. But as we know, during the times that we're having these talks, true spiritual surgeries are happening in our physical body. As we are seated, opening our minds, especially in the presence of truly enlightened beings like the ones that were with us last Sunday. Not that they aren't here, but you know what I mean. So they bring rescue teams to get rid of entities that are with us. But the ones who don't want us to be rescued, they create excuses inside of our mind. Just as an example, they say, don't go there because something else is more important. And there we lost an opportunity. A big opportunity for our own benefit, because in the spiritual network, there are those who don't want us to move forward. And depending on where we go, we may counterbalance those negative influences as Iasko is bringing to us, and somewhat even rescue the entities that are in this network of ours because we attracted them, and will be freed as much as they will be freed from our negative influence, because no one is a victim. So in this regard, if we bring ourselves to places such as this or other spiritual centers, spiritual places, spiritual meetings, we'll more likely be attuned with higher minds that will find an easier way to help us and the ones that are with us. Mind to mind. All right? So let's wrap up now with a visualization. A visualization that shall help us in our everyday lives. And we can find a comfortable position wherever we are. And quiet down our minds and bodies by breathing in and out, focusing our minds in our breathing. As we breathe in, we allow this blessed oxygen to take in new health into the cells of our spiritual and physical body. Breathing out, we let go of toxins. Breathing in, we energize. Breathing out, feeling the blessing within and around us. Let us visualize ourselves laying down on our bed at home. And the sun shining bright in a beautiful morning, inviting us to serve, to being good instruments. And with a smile in your face, you stand up and you visualize yourself fully aware of your co-creative power. And you visualize yourself in a morning prayer. Expressing gratitude for everything in your life. You look at your hands and somewhere around you, you find a pen. And you write a message to someone in your life who has long been in need of encouragement. Write that note, that message of encouragement. Put your love in that message, as if it were a remedy of light. Put it in an envelope, seal it, put a stamp, put the address on it, and mail it out. Visualize yourself now at work, and you have this light of protection, your guardian angel. You perceive the presence of your guardian angel next to you, guiding your steps. And you visualize yourself self-controlled, centered, smiling and spreading goodness and helpfulness to everyone. Willing to serve, to help the needs of others. Now, visualize yourself in a very special place that you may call it a retreat of peace. Envelop yourself in light, as in front of you is your guardian angel, the one that may guide you, mentor you, coach you. Feel the rays of light coming from his or her heart, enveloping you in much love. And you visualize that the love from this light being brings about a bouquet of flowers and is given to you in your hand. Dedicate one of these healing flowers to the person who is here, seated on your right, on your left, behind you, in front of you. And we say in one thought, in one feeling, our gratitude to you, dear Lord, for unveiling the potential inside of us. May we become ever more fraternal, helping one another, doing our share, so we can, as one big family, bring our uniqueness to a better world, a more harmonious universe. May we use the ability that you have given us, our sixth sense, our mediumship, to the benefit of all and everyone. And in your guidance, protection, and permission, may you bless the water we shall drink today, so we can receive the remedy that we need, and we can share the blessings with everyone in our lives. And so be it.
Want to learn more about the ins and outs of mediumship? The book In the Realms of Mediumship by the spirit doctor Andre Luiz through the medium Chico Xavier analyzes the various aspects of mediumistic communication and mediumship. He also praises the efforts of mediums who are faithful to the spiritual mandate they received before they reincarnated, warning them about the risks of badly practiced exchanges between the two worlds. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Want spirituous books for your children? At Edicei of America, you will find a collection of them. From the best-selling book, Our Father, in which the spirit Mei Mei through Chico Xavier brought countless poems, stories, and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Adelson Sales on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Emmanuel's Novels. The reputable mentor Emmanuel wrote a 5-book series of spiritist novels that can truly transform your life. Starting with 2,000 years ago, Emmanuel delights our minds with the true account of characters that are so similar to each of us. Discover yourself in Emmanuel's novels and live better. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Did you know you can help support Kardec Radio to enrich the lives of others? Make your love donation at www.kardecradio.com. Would you like to show support while spreading the word about Kardec Radio? Visit the Kardec Radio online store. Go to www.kardecradio.com and click on Store.
If you missed out on previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand sections of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website, www.kardecradio.com.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.